Hello and welcome to another News of the Week episode here on Ideal Wealth Grower YouTube channel, and for those of you who listen on the audio. So today I want to talk about something that kind of came back up when I did a couple of interviews for the Ideal Investor Show this week, and that is the question, and there was articles in our newsletter as well if you read that, where the question is, how is housing going to look like in the future? And one thing that is pretty obvious is a lot of the media has been talking about that housing is getting harder and harder for people, like, when they get to the age when they normally would be liking to live in a single family home or something like that, to be able to afford it. And there are obviously multiple components to that. And we have talked many times about the impact of high interest rates, meaning like the mortgage payment gets higher, which means it subsequently that the property that you might be interested in gets harder and harder to afford. But there's the other side as well, and that is the starting asking price or the purchase price of a property in the first place. And if you look at for the last couple of years, you will see that the purchase prices have really increased a lot. So now we have this combination of relatively elevated purchase prices, even for regular like 3-bedroom, 2-bath houses, and high interest rates. So what is one way that we can potentially see that people can still get into single family housing or some kind of more housing unit that is not like an apartment or a dorm for that matter? And one trend that we have seen for many years is that people typically more towards the end of their working career realize that they no longer need a huge amount of space, and therefore downsize to a smaller house, for example, when they go into retirement, or even a tiny house. And there's this whole tiny house craze going on, which is fine, and I think it's fun. But then if you go to the other end, and that's where this really interesting interview came in during the podcast this week, and that is, how can you maybe get into the starting of a home without having to buy like a big home right away? And there are now organizations who actually look at a modular approach, one of which is Boxabl, which is a company that has a factory in Nevada, I think in Las Vegas, where their goal is to build basically boxes, individual units, kind of in a sense like Lego boxes, where each box is right around 400 square feet. But, and that's really the interesting thing, these boxes can be attached to each other, both on the sides and on top. So if you imagine you were wanting to get out of an apartment kind of situation or dormitory living when you finished your studies at the university and you got your first job, or when you want to basically set up a family, how can you actually do this using modular construction? And the idea here would be to say, okay, maybe I start out with one or two of those boxes. And I really encourage you to go online on YouTube or so and look, just put in Boxabl.com and you can see YouTube videos. The reason, by the way, that they are called Boxabl, and they're not to be basically compared to shipping containers, because that's another thing that people do, is converting shipping containers into basically boxes to live in. But Boxabl is mainly because they can make it's kind of really amazing. They can make the house in such a way that it folds together and can be transported in a folded situation on a truck, and then gets to the side where you want to put it together, set it on the foundation, unfold it, and it's tight and it's durable and it's really well made and it's all in pristine condition. And so that's basically what it means. But the point is, and what I thought was fascinating, what I wanted you to kind of contemplate and get to you as news of the week, is if you really think it through, if somebody says, okay, I start out on my own with one box, 400 square feet. Then maybe you find a partner and you say, okay, you want to basically start a relationship, and you add another box. Now you're in 800 square feet. And let's say you start a family and you get a baby and you get another box, and now you're in 1200 square feet. And if the family grows, you can add another box and do that, and now you're basically at 1600 square feet. What that means is your house, your space can actually grow with you, and in this case, each of these boxes is about $60,000. So that is also much more affordable than a fully finished like 1,600 square foot house, which in most places today is probably 200,000, 300,000, and even more than that to purchase, especially when it's not pretty old. Now these are literally brand new. So you can basically also consider, okay, I want to grow into this. I want to grow my house with my family, and I'm specifically saving for it, which would also give you potentially the option to say, I don't necessarily need to get a mortgage if I can find a way to put these $60,000 for each unit aside, save it, put it into some, especially right now, high yield savings accounts or stuff like that, so that you never really or rarely have to have any kind of large size mortgage, or if anything, then only a small, short duration mortgage. So this concept I thought was really fascinating, and I wanted to bring it to you that there is now a way they're starting producing these things where you can start with 1 unit or 2 units and then keep adding on to it. And one thing that it will obviously require, and I've been hoping for many, many decades now, that the people in the building departments and in the cities and locations that are actually responsible for housing would finally come around and be a little more flexible, right? Where they would say, okay, we sell you like a 4,000 square foot lot, and on that lot it is allowed to go with initially 400 square feet box and then keep adding to it up all the way to 2,000 or something like that. Right? Because so many times we have seen in these permitting processes that only a single family house of a specific type is allowed, or only like condos are allowed, or only certain things are allowed. And if these restrictions persist, we will never get rid of our supply and demand issue and the lack of housing. So I thought it was interesting to bring this to you, especially since there isn't a huge amount of other news going on over the summer right now, but really look into this and kind of imagine how this could work for you or for your kids to have another alternative to get into residential real estate, into housing, without having to go from like an apartment all the way immediately to a full-size house. So be well, stay safe, and I talk to you next week.